welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masses Restaurants in St. Louis. There's 5 locations, stlmasses.com. If you're driving through St. Louis, again, I mention this every time I do one of these Stern-esque type interviews. If you're not from St. Louis, you should stop there. They're my favorite restaurant, and they love Howard Stern interviews. They love David Letterman, and so they're going to love my next guest, because my next guest today, actually, that's Dave's Netflix show, my next guest, I believe.
Yeah, right. No introduction needed.
It's Vinnie Favale. You know that voice. You know
a long introduction.
You know that face. Vinnie Favale, of course, was a VP at CBS for many years. He was the VP of Late Night East Coast, which Howard would make fun of on and on and on, and it was always fun. But Vinnie, thank you for coming on and joining me here today. And what a backdrop you have.
It's my pleasure to thank you. We're in my basement. I have my Apple TV on that side and my Beatles bookcase in the back. All Beatles all the time.
So, and I always mention that I've been on these. I've been doing little pre-interviews. I did not mention this in my pre-interview, but literally the reason why your name came to my head. My wife makes fun of me, or my mom. We talked about that. I've intertwined those two. I was sitting at my computer and just suddenly, and I'm not kidding, started singing "Restless, Restless."
Your purple dress, put on my dancing shoes.
And I said, Vinny, hey, where's Vinny? Where's Vinnie Favale at? So we'll talk about
what happened to Vinnie Favale.
So whatever did happen. So let's talk real quick, just what you're up to now, and then we'll kind of run through some of the historical stuff and have some fun and tell some stories. But Vinnie Favale, right now, 2020, COVID, what are you doing these days? What's keeping you busy?
I am self-isolating. I am doing what everyone else is doing. In New Jersey, we're all banding together, it seems, New York and New Jersey. Prior to COVID, I guess as recently as March, I had left CBS a couple of years ago, and I've been on my own writing another musical for all the people who want to criticize my investment in my Hereafter musical. I'm working on another one, which ironically was called Happy New Year, which is not everything has to change now.
I was gonna say, is poor Tom Gismondo having to stand there next to you?
He's not working on this one, but he's there in spirit. Anyway, long story, even longer. It was wonderful going into the city 3 days a week with my WeWorks, developing different projects, which I'm still working on. It's a lot harder doing it from home. But like everyone else, I'm just, catching up on things, writing, reflecting, and hoping that we get through this okay eventually.
Yeah, it's just kind of tough when you start trying to do stuff on your own and then boom, this happens. But again, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I looked at your bio. I kind of knew most of this, but I didn't realize that you got on Dave Letterman's show early in the day. Did you want to be an on-camera type person? Was that where you? Yeah, tell me how.
Well, there was a little bit of Lucy, like, oh, put me on TV, Ricky. I'm just a fan. I always have been. Remain. Sometimes it's dangerous when you get a little too close to see how the stuff is made, how the sausage is made. But I'm happy to say that I have remained a fan of both Letterman and Howard, even after seeing up close. Comedy is difficult. It's a big business. Doesn't always start out that way. Howard started out small, and so did Dave. But my first job was at 30 Rock, which was amazing. Like to be out of Brooklyn College, and now I'm actually walking in these hallowed halls. On the third floor was the Tom Snyder Show. On the second floor was Imus in the Morning and WNBC Radio. All of that, and then you take the elevator up on the sixth floor, and on one side it was. Live at 5, the NBC New There was the big local news, and on the other side of the hall was Studio 6A, where Letterman did his show, and prior to that, on that floor, Carson did the show when they did the show from New York, and then you go up to the ninth floor, which is where the studio that I worked for WYNY, which was an FM radio station, and there was a big window that looks down on the famous 8H. Saturday Night Live and the history of live TV, and Lorne Michaels' office was on the ninth floor. So my routine was amazing, living at home, getting on the B train to Manhattan and walking I never wanted to leave. I worked till 8, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, because it was like being in Cooperstown. It's like working in a place where it all happened. So when in 1982, I was excited when Letterman got his show at 12:30. It's like one of our guys have made it.
That
And I don't know if you remember that, but that was a big deal.
Yeah, no, but that, yeah, his show, I was not old enough to remember him coming on the air, but as a kid growing up, I mean, I recorded, and I was a nerd back then, I think, and we're probably fellow nerds. I recorded this show and watched it on VHS the next day. I'd get home from school and I would watch Letterman from the night before because I would record it. I didn't want to. First of all, I loved it. I loved having them on tape, but I didn't want to stay up all night. But the thing I mean, you think about that building about. Like with 1984, you've got David Letterman, Howard Stern, Eddie Murphy, and then the giants of all these names are walking through the door there.
It's insane.
Yeah. I never aspired to be like a vice president, which is what you do become. But where does it become where you're deciding, all right, I want to be sort of in charge? Because you get to Comedy Central, what, 85, 86? Not maybe late 90s. But
I got the Comedy Central. We actually started off with the Comedy Channel. So I'll give you, I'll try to take you through it quickly and not boring at all, hopefully. So in 82, going back to 82, I'm working for a radio station and traffic department, back office stuff. Howard Stern did not get there yet. He came like a year later. But there was notices going around the building that David Letterman was doing a talent show. So he launched in February of 82. And in October of 82, where he had been on several months and there was a buzz, he was doing a very sarcastic talent show of NBC employees. It was not to embrace talent. It was more to deface it. You know, it was probably a preview of what would become Stupid Human Tricks, you know? And if you saw my thing, that was pretty much a Stupid Human Trick. And I was hip enough, I think, to get it. Like, oh, you know. But anyway, I'm minding my own business. I got a call from the show one day, and they said, "Hey, we heard you're really funny. Do you want to audition?" And I'm like, "Well, who told you that?" Apparently, people I worked with, you know, funny guy in the office is a lot different than funny guy on national TV. Okay. And I was intrigued because it's like, oh, there's an audition. Now, if I only had an act, that would be great, you know? So I figured out this novelty, this bit where essentially, and you could see it on YouTube, you were either going to laugh with me or laugh at me. Either way, you were going to laugh. And I didn't care as long as you laughed. And I auditioned for the writers. It was a big cattle call. And I got a call back. And the call back was now an audition for Dave in his office with the producers and a smaller group. And I had seen Dave a lot. We bumped into each other a lot because if you remember the history of late night, Dave was the heir apparent to Carson at one point, right? But back in the day. And when they gave him a morning show, and then the morning show got canceled, and they still wanted to be in business with Dave, NBC. So he was in limbo for almost a year, and his office was near mine. So we would just kind of bump into each other in the hall, watching Howard do his radio show. By that time, Howard had come on, and there was if you remember the Private Parts movie, there was a scene where the tour guide, you know, takes people off the elevator, and God knows what's happening on the show. That's what it really was like. And David and I would often find ourselves wordlessly not really talking to each other. He's just like, it's that head nod that you give that person you seem to see every day or every other day. And we were just watching Howard do a show, which was amazing preview of my own life with these guys. Anyway, I auditioned for Dave. Dave goes, "Hey, I remember you from the hall. I remember you, blah, 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 blah." I make the show, and then it just escalates. Then, like a week before the show's going to tape, I have an act down. It's like four minutes of stand-up. Really, really kind of, you know, hokey, but very much in that stupid human tricks. I got a call. They said, Dave wants to do a remote with you. And I knew the remote's on the show. Like, that was close. Wow, that's great. Yeah, we want to just follow you on the job. So they came to my office. Dave spent the day with me. And I remember their intern that was with them was Chris Elliott, which was wild. After what ended up...
Wait, the guy on Schitt's Creek? That guy? Okay.
And at that point, he was just an intern on the show. He wasn't the Chris Elliott everybody knew on the show, the way what he would become. It was fun. Dave actually it was interesting because he's a broadcaster, really is a broadcaster. He started in radio. He knew exactly what my job was. The traffic department, just managing the flow of commercials and promos and live announcer copy. So he got it, and which made for an interesting interview. And that was just shooting B-roll footage, and God only knows what they were going to do with it. The day of the taping, I get a call, hey, Dave wants to interview you. And at that point, I was like, this is crazy. Like, why would he want to interview me? I live in Frankie and Mary's basement apartment in Brooklyn. I don't have a movie coming out. I don't have a book coming out. What am I going to talk about? Then just be yourself. They were very, very casual. And it was amazing. It came out great. I did really, really well. The interview we fell into this rhythm. And that after that was it. It's not like I'm going to be on TV. I'm going to be a stand-up comic. I went on with my career. The people I worked with at NBC left just before I left to start MTV. And then I followed them there. And then suddenly I work in cable. And I'm at MTV at the beginning of that incredible era. And in 89, I left... in 86, I went to A&E, and then in 89, I was one of the founders of Comedy Channel. If you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but before there was Comedy Central, it was Comedy Channel, and our big thing was Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Was it only on half the time too? Is that right? Am I thinking of, I know?
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of coverage. It was on part of it. We were broadcasting all day, but they only took little parts of it.
Well, I remember like movie time became E, but I thought there was these two channels that one would be in the.
It was. So what happened was you're almost right.
Just trying to think out loud here.
HBO launches Comedy Channel, a basic comedy network with VJs. Ironically, very much like an MTV, only with comedy. Lots of comedy clips and great personalities who all went on to do great things. And then MTV launched a comedy network called the Ha Network. And the cable system said, listen, we barely want one, let alone two. So we merged and became Comedy Central. And my big claim to fame there was pitching the idea that we should cover the State of the Union live and make fun of the president, which we did with Al Franken, ironically. At the time, he was still on SNL, writer, comedian. He hosted it. And it put the network on the map. It was great for my career. Did a lot of great things there. And then in 96, I left Comedy Central to go to CBS because my friend Mitch Semmel had been working there on the new Cosby Show, and he said late night's going through a lot of changes. They just fired the executive producer. The head writer's that Rob Burnett is now the new executive producer, and he the show wants their own guy that works at the network. Basically, someone that really was going to strongly advocate for them. Often at the risk of his own job, which would be me. And I got the job. And, in the interview with the producer, I was told by a lot of people, listen, it's going to be a long search and there's no guarantee. They might even not fill the spot. They're fickle. In my interview, it went so well with Rob, he excused himself, then he came back and goes, I want you to meet with Dave. So I met with Dave instantly on the interview. He remembered, the show that I was on, and I was like, Jesus Christ, now, like the guy who did a sock puppet, on national TV on your show is now the network executive. But it was great, and it was an amazing run there from 96 till he went off the air in what was it, like 14 or 15? And in that time, in 98, CBS merged with Infinity. Mel Karmas and the radio group, and I'm like, holy shit, Howard Stern is now part of our family. And I just would tell anyone that would listen, we got to do something, Howard. We got to do something, Howard. And I was in a position to make something happen, and it was great. We set up. I pitched the idea, or the idea that we should do something with Howard, and that's when the Saturday night show came in. Which I said, let's not lie. Let's call it what it is: the Howard Stern Radio Show, which is what it was, a TV show that was basically the radio show. Excuse me, and that's when I got to work with Howard. And I, as a longtime listener, I'm sure when you're in the Howard real world of working with him, whether you're his housekeeper or you bring him his coffee or whatever's in his world, if you're open to it, he'll pull you in. And I was absolutely open to it because I was such a fan. and that's how that happened. So there were days where, then when Jackie left, I had been with the show long enough that Howard wanted me to sit in for some shows, which was amazing. That was another experience. And there were some days where I would be like, holy shit, I'm starting my day on the Howard Stern show on the air. And then I am in the afternoon, I was working with Letterman every day, but there were times when I was on the Letterman show just as myself. And I'm like, this is too weird. And I'm proud to say I stopped and appreciated those moments. I'm like, this is going to end. It's not always going to be great. It may not even end great, but it's an incredible moment in time. And it was more than a few occasions where that happened. So it was wonderful.
Yeah, so the Howard, I want to do Letterman kind of towards the end because that's obviously a big part, but I love the Howard Stern stuff. So how many meetings do you have with Howard a week? I mean, did he know you at this point, or did you become, because you're...
Oh, what Howard was, it was incredible. We were partners in developing the show. We worked like closely together. So before we launched the CBS show, we spent a lot of time together. He's a great guy, like a great, great guy. And the off-the-air Howard was so, in some ways, so similar, but also different. Like really a business guy, and really, like Dave, completely micromanaging in a good way every aspect of the show. It wasn't just like stick a camera in here and put it on CBS. He had thoughts and opinions and strong feelings about a lot of things. So we were real partners on that. And going, when you're in the Howard world, there's weekly meetings, and unlike late night TV, the meetings, everyone is there. It's not just the writers. That's the great thing about Howard. A good idea is a good idea no matter where it came from. And with Howard, it was like we hit the ground running, super, super close, which allowed that ease on air, I think.
What you said you sat in, so were you starting to get these feelings of, I know I'm a vice president at Dave Letterman, but what if, because that chair was open, Craig Gass was there, Artie, Ron Zimmerman, all these guys came through. Were you ever in your mind going, well, I wonder if I just took this, what if they offered me this job just to sit here and be in the Jackie chair? Did that ever come across your mind?
No, I never thought I was good enough for that. And also I was very happy with my job. It was amazing. What I questioned is how am I getting away with this? I am saying the wrong thing. I'm like one word away from blowing up my whole career, especially back then where it was a lot more frank conversation going on about the world. So no, I never aspired to that, but it was a thrill. It was amazing, and I felt very, very lucky. And then over time, they rotated different people, but we were still doing the show, And the funny thing is you didn't have to sit in the chair to be on the show. A lot of the things that I did was when there were a couple of times where Howard just wanted me to sit on the couch, like when Ringo was there, which I'm still embarrassed by my performance while Ringo. I helped produce that segment, and then I proceeded to not let Ringo answer any of the questions. I was I was correcting him, which was a disaster. So yeah, so I felt like I was part of the show already, regardless of where I was in the studio, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, I was looking. You were on the September 10th show with Craig Gass, 2001.
Yeah.
So that's the day before.
I had to go to. It was crazy. I would have been on the 11th as well, but I had to go to LA to pitch Jump the Shark. We were doing the Jump the Shark game show. So yeah, it was. In fact, I was in LA when 9/11 happened, and it was just Howard was amazing what he did during that whole time.
I was a huge Artie fan. I love that he got the chair. I felt like it was like the second rebirth. Tell me I'm guessing, I always ask for an update.
Jackie was great, by the way.
They were both great. And that's what, I always have that conversation. It's like, it's two different shows and they're both great. I mean, there's no difference to me. And that's probably true. But Artie, do you keep in touch? Do you have an update? People are wondering where he is, so let's ask.
No, and this is the one case where I'm taking no news is good news. I recently got a note from his sister Stacy to connect on LinkedIn, which I thought was a wonderful sign that okay, this is great. We had a beautiful exchange. I said, give my best to Artie. I didn't want to intrude, but I'm the pictures. He looks amazing, except for whatever physical problem with the nose. And I don't know if that's just him as a reminder to not go down that trail again, or maybe he's done something with it already. But he was a good-looking guy, and the great guy, just great, salt of the earth guy. I basically call him and Jackie the old Darren and the new Darren from Bewitched. They were both great, in their own way.
Yeah. No, Jackie was on here, and I was trying to say, Jackie, why did you leave? And he pretty much just said, I was drinking, and I was going to get divorced, and I couldn't wake up, and I see a lot of comments of people going, he's not answering. Why won't he answer the question? So it is funny, because he did leave the Beatles, as you know.
I think, you know what? There's a documentary that's supposed to be coming out on. I know I spoke to the to the director on camera about it, but I think he dives into it in more depth in the documentary. But look, I think they call this bluff, and sometimes when that happens, it's like, what do you do? And I think all those things added up. But he looks great. I think he's healthier now than he's ever been. Jackie, that is, and Artie too, hopefully. But it was a run. It was an amazing run.
You made and you you would call in from what? You're on the train, right? So what does an executive do?
On the bus. I was going to do a fight with Donald Trump on the bus. This was amazing,
What were you doing riding out? You're a VP and you're riding the bus into work, and then you're calling the biggest radio show. Tell me a little bit about
Stuttering John couldn't understand, why aren't I in a limousine? I'm like, what kind of world do you live in? I live in the suburbs. When you live in the suburbs of Jersey, you could take a train, you could take a bus, or you could drive in. Driving in is insane. Why would you drive in when you could be driven in? It just happens to be a bus. I know a bus does feel low rent, but trust me, it was a very white-collar bus. And I would whisper in a very creepy way various things, the ratings, or get into fights. I once got into a brutal fight on the air, more than once, but it was fun.
I remember the one you were talking. The one I'm thinking about is Stuttering John when he's going to work for Jay. So you call in. And you are so, you're defending Dave to the tilt, but you're whispering on the bus. It's just because
great guy. No, really, Dave is not. He's got the better audience, a Democrat. I know, it was so creepy.
It was funny though. So yeah,
I did appreciate how much fun that would be for the show, even if it was at my expense. Same thing with Debbie tapes. I knew I was after Gary released his tapes. I was like, oh man, I wonder if I'm remembering these correctly. I think mine were sweet and romantic and blah, 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 blah. And then I remember telling Gary, hey, that I had I didn't tell Howard, tell Gary. And then Gary threw me under the bus one day. We were getting to somewhat of a tiff on air. And he goes, hey, Vinnie, tell Howard about your tapes. And Howard seized on that. And when I had to buy a Betamax machine so I could play the tapes. And Debbie would tell you, I was mortified. I'm like, oh my God, this is psycho shit. No one will ever see this stuff. And Debbie was laughing so hard. And then finally I realized this is really good for the show. So I gave them a small part of it.
That was a bad idea. Gary, I think, got like $30,000. What? Those tapes, those tapes scare me a little bit, Vinny. I got to be honest. But oh my, Debbie.
Listen. I won't argue with you there.
Does Dave say to you, "What are you doing?" Now, come on, you can be on the show, but now we've crossed the line.
He was aware. There was one time where I do remember where Howard was really angry at Dave, and I don't know how much was wrestling or not. You hear the anger, and then he's kind of smiling when you're in there sometimes, but it came off as really, really bad. And I fought back and I defended Dave, and Dave called me and he said, I really appreciate that, which I thought was nice. He goes, I don't know what's going on with Howard. I always thought we had a high regard for each other. But a lot of it was just the wrestling and stuff. I think Dave might have been amused by it, maybe annoyed sometimes because I wasn't spending time. I should have been more attention to the show. But this was it was 6 a.m, 7 a.m, 8 a.m. There were times where I would get into work at 8, and I'd go there to do something. I'd be sitting there'd be something going on, and I'd be at my desk at 9 o'clock. It's not that it took anything away from those other things. So, but I don't know what he really thought, but I just love that they're good friends now, which is amazing.
Yeah, and so the Howard relationship just comes from what, the CBS show, right? That's when you first kind of get to know him, and then you work with him,
really it.
And he just likes you, right? And he starts to like you, right? I mean, that's pretty much how he just decides. I really like Vinny.
It's a combination of liking you, but even if he didn't like you, if he thought it was good for the show, you know, it would, you're in, you know, so either way, you know, it's great. But I actually met Howard before the CBS years when I was at Comedy Central. I pitched, he ended up doing it, but we pitched it to him before. And he came in with his agent, Don Buchwald, and we pitched cameras in the studio. And he said, I don't want to do that. It'll ruin the surprise, da, 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 da. Then he pitched him a one-on-one interview show. Do you remember when he had a show? I remember when he interviewed Phil Hartman, and he brought Phil's wife out at the time, and she was on camera. And then later on, what ended up happening was so freaky. But like that, so that was the smarter thing what they did, because that started a relationship with them. And then when Howard was ready to, where the technology got better with the lipstick cameras and you could really hide them, those old E shows look amazing. I mean, Doug Goodstein, I know you had Doug on, was part of that team, and Ganji, an incredible, and Scott DePace. What those guys did is amazing. Those shows, I mean, and we're talking like thousands of shows. Not, you know, one radio show might yield 4 episodes, right? So
I want to get Scott on here. I don't know if he's interested in talking about it, but I think about that.
sure he would.
So many cameras, so much going on, especially in that little E studio. But then when you get the bigger studio, plus Howard has an angle that he wants, so he'll call Scott in to yell at him because the angle he doesn't like, which is always funny to me.
Right.
What was it like when Howard would go on Dave? Because Howard always made a big deal of this, and I know Dave, I'm assuming, really enjoyed, because it was probably very easy for him that night. What was it like for you, though? Because you're sort of that in-between guy. Did you just get to...
worlds colliding. It was great, except for one time was horrible, and I'll tell you that in a second. But it was like a circus. It was great. 53rd Street, which is the side entrance. You know, it was like the Beatles are on. You know, it was crazy. All the fans would be out there. The paparazzi would always be lined up, but they were out in full force whenever Howard was on, and Howard would be very generous with his time and linger out there and sign autographs and take pictures. And then it would be, he never did a pre-interview, which is mandatory with most guests, so you never knew what was going to happen. So it was always great. And then afterwards, it was always like a high of, did I do good? You did great. All that kind of conversation. The one time, which was a nightmare, was when he was battling with my boss, Leslie Moonves. And it was really ugly, like really, really bad. And he said he was going to wear something on the show that make a statement, and I'm like, no, don't, you can't. This is wrong. Da, da, da. And I didn't get my way, and you know, he had on the shirt like what it said. I hate, the picture of Leslie. I hate Leslie. That kind of thing. And Leslie took it in good stride, but that day wasn't fun. That wasn't a fun night. Tragedy was time. A lot of time yields great stories and comedy, but in the moment, it was pretty ugly.
Well, how hard was it? Because, Dave's your boss. Howard wants to come on. He wants to do some weird stuff. I mean, are you and him conduits to each other, or is it Howard still just doing
No, I'm just trying to, he's laughing at my torture. And really, my boss was Leslie Moonves. It was Dave and Leslie, but I was a CBS employee, not an employee of Worldwide Pants. So it was dicey. It was a minefield everywhere you went.
All right, so you're known most famously on the Stern Show for Restless. I never saw the video till yesterday when I was doing research. I actually researched for these things, and I saw the video of you guys doing it. And I think the problem Howard had, obviously, first was that you did it in his studio, around his studio on off hours. So did you know that would get out? Did you want that to get out? Because
no, the story is actually different.
Okay,
I did that. The original Restless was recorded at WNBC.
Is this on the box set? The 4-box set of the Restless.
Yeah. Tom and I were in my office, and Tom worked for actually worked for WNBC, and I worked for WYY, the FM. So we're on the same floor, and Tom and I were budding songwriters. So we had this song, and we recorded that demo like in '82, and then one day word got out at K-Rock, because Tom then was at K-Rock. He was the head of business affairs. He would sign their paychecks, and Tom's a great guy, and they would be like, do you know that Tom, Tom's very corporate, Tom and Vinnie write songs. They've written songs forever. Like the idiot, because we were playing them in the office one day, Tom and I, and then we said we should re-record that Restless one. So we recorded it, right, and then Howard was, I think, mock angry. I think he just loved the idea. It's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And it was, again, a disaster that was made for great radio.
And normally on the contests that were had on the Stern Show, I'd always be like, "Oh, that's fixed." Like Winfred's job. Like Gary, I know Richard and Sal did a great job, but the guys who won this contest, that song they put together, it's so good, and I sing the way they sing it. It's so
the country guy, right?
Yeah, the restless.
It's a great.
Those guys should be. I mean, to do that with that song, and I'm sorry, Vinny. The song is funny, but for them to make that thing sound like that is amazing.
Well, so here's the thing with that, which was incredible. They got over 1,000 entries, and the rules were very liberal. It's like all you have to do is use the words. Okay, so you could if you could find the melody or rhythm, great. We wrote it like a Ramones song, and there was one submission that was exactly the way we had it, and it's actually pretty damn fucking good. But anyway, these other people, they brought their brilliance. They, their musical skills, their talents, their vocals, their arrangements. And it was not fixed at all. We got over 1,000 entries, and then we did the show, and my buddy John Tita from Warner Chappell was one of the judges, and the three top ones, including, how about Robert Goulet? How great was that?
How did they get him? Who, they just know him, or someone knew him, I guess?
One of the, the show, the show didn't do it.
It was like a fan, I think, but
Ernest Lupinacci is a guy who's a big fan of the show. Look, the Howard Stern show, some of the fans are like really big deals, like rock stars and movie stars and directors and writers. And Ernest is one of those guys. Ernest is a great, he did a bunch of promos for ESPN. You might remember where Goulet sang them, doing Vegas-style arrangements. And being a big fan of the show, he was able to get Goulet and William Shatner to each do a version that he produced, that he oversaw. They did a great job. They trusted him.
His is good too. I can sing his too. You wore your purple dress into a Voljuice.
Did you see me get into a fight with him though? I was like, you got the lyrics all wrong. Like, the guy is down. She left him, but you make it sound like, hey, bring on the next one.
I mean, it's funny because all of them were great. But yeah, how many times were you on the show? Like, just even via call-ins, or how many times did you go in? Can you think of how many?
Yeah. Hundreds. I mean, just a lot. It was over a long period of time. The last time I was on was when Howard let me come on to promote the primetime special that I produced on Letterman's final week. And that was great. That was nice. Howard was very generous with his time. And, the show evolves. There's a lot of guests that were on back in the day that aren't on anymore. It's a different atmosphere now. So, but the guys, everyone that works here is fantastic. Gary and John, Richard and Sal, Benji's, love him. They're great guys.
Yeah. So moving into the Letterman years, 96, you show up there, and that was a volatile time, as you mentioned. I mean, if fans of Dave, Rob Burnett had been there forever, Robert Morton would have been there forever, and he moves on, and then Burnett. Tell me a little bit about how hard it was, because it wasn't this is now Jay, I think, starts winning right around here too. So it's like, this is kind of some nasty stuff you're kind of getting in, right? I mean, was it like that, or?
The tide turned. Well, the tide turned. We went from being number one to, you remember, it was just like right out of the gate. It was big, but there were so many things that happened behind the scenes that people aren't aware of that made it harder for Dave and easier for Jay to be number one. CBS lost football. You're a sports guy. They lost the NFL package. That was one of the main reasons that Dave went there. He was wooed. Listen, you're going to come. We're going to promote the hell out of you. This is before me, but that was what the pitch was. You're going to be on CBS. We're going to have the games on the weekends. We're going to promote who you're doing. It's going to be great. And then what happens? Fox outbids CBS. They lose football, and suddenly, like, CBS was losing affiliates. In Detroit, the CBS affiliate switched to Fox, and CBS had to buy a UHF channel, and those things are. It sounds hokey. You would think, well, as long as he's on, people find him. No, it doesn't work that way.
Well, and back then, some cable companies didn't carry channel 58 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, there was a lot of stuff. So that led to the downfall. That was a big part of it. And then NBC, the must-see TV Thursday night, the Juggernaut. Ironically, Friends and ER were shows that were developed by Leslie Moonves because he was the head of Warner Brothers Studios. They sold those shows to NBC. Kudos to NBC for buying them, but they were developed by Leslie's team. And then Leslie had left to come to CBS, and it was, and then on the CBS side of it, Dave had no lead in. It was, before Leslie got there. I was there at the same time Leslie got there. It was Murder, She Wrote. And Diagnosis Murder. This wasn't CSI. This wasn't Survivor. It wasn't all the cool shows that eventually Leslie brought on. It was all these old shows. And it was tumbleweeds. It was really, really bad. And then, Morty was fired and Rob took over. And I walk in there and I was so over my head. I didn't know, I didn't realize that, you just have to let people vent sometimes. The frustration was palpable. And a lot of times they would, complain to me about everything. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm the guy that's got to do something about it. And I would often go to Mitch or Leslie, and I realized, I got to do this myself. I can't go running I got to figure these things out. And I did. It took me a couple of years to really get good at my job and navigate those waters. But it was really frustrating. It was frustrating for me personally, knowing we have the funniest show. It's clearly the best show in late night, hands down. And that's not even a knock at Jay. Jay was doing a commercial show, a long monologue, and dancing Edos and all that. And Dave and Robert, they're almost like a parody of a talk show, right? It was really funny, but yeah, it wasn't mainstream enough, I guess, at that time. And the lead-ins were horrible. So it was a combination, and that's what I did for almost a whole run. It never really got good, we'd have peaks, Dave had bypass surgery. Oh, we won that night. And then it's like the next night, it's like back to normal, people wanted it when there was something in it for them. The show after 9/11 was one of the most incredible shows in TV. We didn't even know, can we do shows like this again, and Dave figured out a way to do it.
Yeah, one of the retrospectives, I don't know if it was the one you did or CNN, all of them, I consumed all of them. I was a huge fan of Dave in the 90s or early 80s, late 80s, 90s, right. And even the CBS stuff was fun. But I think Conan said it best. He goes, it was the anti-talk show. Johnny Carson had this giant band and everything was slick. And Dave would walk out and he would throw pens and he would hit the camera and you would hear things in the background. Barbara Gaines would be screaming. And it made me realize that's why I loved it. And it's why I really got into broadcasting. I was always consumed by what's going on in that background. What did he? And then he would stop the show and go, what are we doing? How much time we got, Morty? And we would just say that as kids. Hey, how much time we got, Morty? So I loved the show. Tell me, so what was your day-to-day like? I mean, are you just basically kind of the liaison? Hey, Dave wants to do this. Can we do that? I want to get Dave this. Tell me what your day-to-day, there
was a production meeting every morning at 11 o'clock. I had offices at Black Rock, which was the CBS headquarters, and I had a little office in the Ed Sullivan Theater, which I hardly used because I didn't want to get too close. I didn't want to be the hovering, nervous network executive. I gained their trust, and the production meeting was all the mechanics of that night show, and then that would end, and then I'd sit with the producers, and then we'd get into all the other real stuff that's going on, gossipy stuff, gallows humor, last night's show, who's upset with who, and everything to do with the network, to do with Dave, to do with a sponsor, all those things. So I would deal with all of that, digest it, figure it out. I would go back to Black Rock, my office there. And what was great is I worked with the best people, the head of marketing, the head of research, head of sales, head of promotion, press. And we would be talking all day long. They needed something from me. I needed affiliates. That world. That was like a big deal. Affiliate relations. They needed a special promo. They need all these things. So I was one-stop shopping for everyone in the network. And they hadn't had that before. Before, when Dave launched, they said, we don't need a network executive, leave us alone. And the network was like, fine. And then when they needed help, they were like, when Rob took over, he goes, I need a partner. So I became that guy. And then kind of same thing with the show. The show would also dump all their needs, wants, frustrations on me. So I would kind of digest it all, synthesize it, figure it out. And it was every day, every hour, there was something going on. And then there would be rehearsals would be in the afternoon. I only went if I was on the show, or if I had a bit that was on the show, I'd go. Otherwise, I wouldn't even. I'd get scripts, make sure everything was okay. No bad sponsor mentions, that kind of stuff. And if there was language issues, I would deal with it as much as I could beforehand. But really, I would try to get there within minutes of the show starting. Took my place in the control room on the back deck behind the director with the other producers, and that was like fasten your seatbelts. You don't know where this is going to go. And there was a great story that involved McCain. And remember when John McCain was running for president?
Katie Couric, right?
Right. He was supposed to do the show. He bailed at the last minute, and Dave was like, "Okay, well, all right." And then I'm sitting there, and in the control room, you know what it's like. There's monitors all over the place. And we actually had a feed from 57th Street where the other stuff, and we could see Dead Rather getting makeup on and all that kind of stuff. And it was really, no one was allowed to use any of that footage, but it was like, okay, well, that's cool. And we see Katie Couric sitting down, and this is in the control room, right? And Dave doesn't know this. We see John McCain like sitting there, and they're like, "Is this happening now?" I'm like, "It can't possibly be." I'm sure this was a pre-tape. And I'm like, "Holy shit, it's happening now!" And they're like, "We got to tell Dave." And I'm like, "Wait." I said, just hold on one second. So I got into an argument with one of the producers, and I'm like, I wasn't saying no because I knew this was gold, but I was like, you have to let me just get ahead of this for 1 second, just 1 second. I wanted to make sure that my boss, Leslie, knew that, because I knew it was going to blow up, right? And there was like, our rehearsal footage would go to 57th Street, and I know the show wouldn't like if they took a video of an uncompromising Dave moment, So it's just like, just be careful here. So we took it outside. We took our fight outside. I'm like, just give me 1 minute, right? I went back in there, and there's a phone. And Dave was talking to Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann was the go-to last-minute guest that we would bring in. And I remember I went under, and I was like, and I whispered, I said, "Listen," again, like the bus voice, amazing things about to happen. I just want to give you a heads up. Like, it wasn't, "Are you okay with this?" Because I couldn't put him in that awkward position. It was like, just, we're about to steal the feed. John McCain, is doing Katie Couric when he said he was going to Washington. Okay, fine. So I covered. I got go for it. They tell Dave, and then boom, magic happens, which was wonderful. And I was just trying to make sure that everybody was covered. That my boss wouldn't get a surprise from a pissed off John McCain or a pissed off Katie Couric. How dare you take that feed, And I did that, and it was wonderful.
This little 5-minute stuff we've done here is so amazing to me because, and I'm not trying. You call in on a bus to the Howard Stern show, and you're talking to Stuttering John. And you're just goofing around, and then you're making these giant decisions for the number 1 or number 2, whatever it was. Or number 3, I remember, was his big billboard. Right. I think this is amazing because in my head I always thought, how is Vinnie a vice president? But that story right there, you just seemingly have what you need to sort of massage everybody, and that is really what that job seemed like it was. Yeah, but that's a great story
to figure that out.
That's a great story to kind of just get inside the head of how it worked. How much did you deal with Dave personally? Because it seems like he doesn't want an executive, but it seems like he's starting to trust you. Tell me a little bit about just your interactions as those years go on. You were there almost 20 years. You were 20 years.
Over 20 years, yeah. 22, 21, 22. Our conversations, they were always cordial. He was complimentary. There were some years, like, 1 year he gave me this beautiful Christmas gift, which he didn't do that to everyone. And so it's just like, it's just his way of showing you his appreciation for you. That's all. Like, I didn't need a gift, but it was wonderful to have the moment like that. But there were, my interactions, there's no high-fiving there. With Howard, like, you could actually celebrate a victory, and there was none of that. So unfortunately, my direct ones were one was really sad and one was really awkward. The awkward one was when the writers wrote a bit where Dave interviews the world's greatest Austin Powers fan, which was like, typical like late night humor. There is no world's greatest Austin Powers fan, but the idea that there would be an Austin Powers fanatic who would be dressed like Austin Powers and all he would do was say shagadelic baby or groovy, all those kind of those buzzwords. Surprisingly, that movie had a lot of them, right? And so there I am in my Austin Powers outfit, and Dave is interviewing me, and all I'm supposed to do is get in his face and just yell at him. There's no script, just yell, groovy baby, do I make you horny baby, shagadelic baby, that, and Dave's supposed to look at me like I'm an idiot, right? And we did it a dozen times, and I have a tape of this, it's pretty funny. We did it a dozen times, and it wasn't working. And Dave was like, Vinny, it's not you. It's just like, this is inherently, like, I get a Star Wars fanatic, whatever. I don't get this. But during the downtimes, he was pumping me for information. So tell me what you really think of your boss. Tell me what you really think of. And he was serious, And I'm like, I can't. My mic is hot. It's going out throughout the whole building. So that was really, it was awkward and funny. The sad one was one, he was just really raging. This is after the heart surgery. And he was understandably upset every time the show would be delayed. And I think the show was being delayed because of a Survivor premiere. Survivor had become this monster show, and it was delaying him. And I found out last minute, and he found out, and he called me. He was screaming at me, really upset. And I made the mistake of sighing, as if like I'm sorry, I feel horrible. And he was like, oh, am I exasperating you? Like he took it the wrong way, and he hung up on me. And then I called back, and I said, that's not it at all. And I went up, and they wanted me to come up, and we had a real good heart-to-heart about ratings and that kind of stuff, where I was trying to explain to him that they're not as important as you think, because, the advertisers loved him, because the show was an iconic show. And unfortunately, it was pre-internet, because so many things, the show, like, more people talked about Letterman the next day than Leno the next day. But more people watched Leno, but Letterman was doing the memorable stuff because he had great writers and great producers. And so that was like, we tried to come to a meeting of the minds there where it's not as bad as you think it is. But other than that, it was just like, really, there was a distance between him and a lot of people on his staff. And I think that was just his way, which is to get into the game mode every night.
I do want to back up on the late night wars, but the things you're just talking about, I'm interested about that end where he does announce his retirement and then he gets a full year. I know just by reading, I've read about him, I know about him, I know he doesn't like people heaping praise on him and telling him how great he is, and I know he's self-effacing and he thinks everything he does is not funny, whatever. But it was almost like a funeral to see all these people come out and talk great about you, and the Conans and the Jon Stewarts, and to realize that, at the end of his career, he literally did launch this whole new, basically how Johnny did with others. Did he get to finally give himself a pat on the back? Not a pat on the back, but did he, at the end of this, because those last 6 weeks, there's a book about it, and I've interviewed that guy. Yeah. Did he finally go, okay, I feel pretty good that this career ended the way it did, whatever that career, the late night thing, and that there is an appreciation of what I did, and maybe some of the stuff, maybe this will live on. Did he get a chance to actually feel, I don't know if you talked about with you, but did you get that sense that he was like, okay, especially that last show? I mean, the 10 biggest freaking names of comedy are out there.
It was amazing, right? And the shows leading up to it, I couldn't answer that. That would really be for him to say.
Get him on the phone. Let's go. Come on. I've been trying for years.
Dave, can you get on it?
Do you have his number? Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have his? Can you call Dave right now? That's a question for real. Can you get on the? Can you get him on the phone?
I'm sure he would take it.
Okay, I'm just curious. All right, but go on about the question.
I'd like to think that maybe if he didn't feel it at the time, he feels it by now, because he did have a second act. It's like what he's doing, these one-on-one interviews on Netflix. I think that's more, in some ways, probably more fulfilling for him than having to talk to, someone from Dawson's Creek. I mean, this guy was interviewing people. He was more famous than most of his guests, that were on the show. So I'd like to think he appreciates and feels the value of it, but I couldn't answer that question.
What was it like during again, he got to kind of watch from afar the Jay Conan stuff. It seemed like it really reinvigorated him. It seemed like he was really into watching this from afar.
I don't have a dog in this fight, but
what were those days like in the office?
It was because it was, again, NBC. I think his problems were, from just reading the Bill Carter book, it was the mistakes that NBC made and the way they treated Dave, and they were making those same mistakes again with Jay. I mean, how do you tell Jay Leno 5 years? They just signed Jay Leno to a 5-year extension, right? And then Conan goes ballistic, and then they go, "Okay, Conan, we'll give you the show in 5 years guaranteed." And they go back to Leno and say, "In 5 years, you're done." And he's the number one show, who was only going to get bigger. And I was going to myself, I was like, oh my God, as we get closer to the end of his contract, are they going to really, who gives 5 years notice? You know? And then I think they realized they made a big mistake, even though Conan is great, but they made a mistake in trying to, replace, Conan. When Dave came to CBS, he was replacing Pat Sajak. There was like nothing there, you know? Dave created that franchise, 11:30, for CBS. They were very careless, and it wasn't fair to Conan. I don't think it was fair to Jay. And yeah, I think you're right. I think Dave really was like, great, I could fight them through these guys by proxy.
There's so many great moments, and then you did put together the tribute show that kind of aired
that was great, but that was stressful because the show didn't want that. They wanted to go out on their own terms. They were doing great packages every night, but I'm like, we're near the end here, and it's not like we're killing in the ratings every night. We need to grab America by the throat and say, this genius, this TV legend, this iconic figure is going off the air. Look what you're going to miss. And I'm very proud of that show that we put together. I did that with Susan Zirinsky from CBS, who now heads up CBS News. But we produced that together with no consultation on the show because they didn't want it. They fought us on it. They really fought us on it. But ultimately, Dave let it happen. And he sent me a beautiful note after it aired. I was very proud of it. You know, I wanted to include as much NBC footage as possible. And they were very wary. They were like, we don't trust that you might take dumps on Jay. It's like, no, it's not about that. It's but I was really proud of that. That was a great, we won the night. It helped CBS win sweeps that season. And I thought it was a great wake-up call for like America to say we should really tune in these last week.
Yeah. Well, and it's a weird thing. And I just remember when all this buildup happened, and I remember, watching that last show. I don't know how a show can make you emotional, and my wife gets mad at me. I don't get emotional. I don't cry. I don't do. But man, I love the Foo Fighters. I watched that thing over, and I still watch it. And I just remember thinking, this is the end of my childhood. I mean, I was 40 at the time, or however old but I was like, that is literally, my childhood and my adolescence, and just the funniest guy, the way he did TV. Because Jimmy Fallon's great. I don't even, who else is out there? Stephen Colbert, whatever. But this Dave thing was so sad to me. That I knew that it was just going to be the end of that era, and it clearly is. I mean, you just don't have. I mean, he literally basically branched from when you had 3 channels to 1,000 channels. So that's my little soliloquy.
Yeah, you're right. It's like 30 years. How old are you? You said you're in your 40s. Whatever. That's most of your life. From 1982. So he's up there with, for your demographic, REM and U2. And, if you could do a music analogy, he's those guys. If you're going to do a TV analogy, he's Miami Vice. He's Friends. He was the iconic show of all those decades.
Yeah, I tried to get, and I might try it again. I didn't try hard enough. Barbara Gaines and Bill Schuft. I tried to get them to join me here.
Oh, you would love them. They're great.
And I'm going to work them over because they did reply to me on Twitter, but I couldn't get them to. And I love Barbara. I remember Barbara from her days, so maybe we'll work together on that and see what we can do.
They were a lot closer to the action than I ever was, so they could share great stories.
And then hopefully,
they were making the show.
Yeah, I would love to just get their intel. So yeah, I was talking about that show. You worked there for pretty much the duration of the CBS show. I mean, can you narrow down 3 favorite moments? I mean, I know we talked about some of the music that you did live on Letterman, but do you have? I mean, everyone obviously remembers Bieber coming out and trying to scratch the thing, or Paris Hilton, and it really showed him kind of working both, being the funny guy with the young group. But do you have any? Right. And then obviously the River Phoenix or Joaquin Phoenix, not River.
The Joaquin Phoenix. That's the thing that I like about Joaquin Phoenix that most people probably don't know is the second appearance when he returned. That was one of my favorites because there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Like everybody was pissed. Not that he did what he did. That was performance art. That was great. But they had a camera crew backstage shooting all that because they were doing a documentary. I don't know if you remember that. And the and the show tried to stop them from using clips from the appearance in the documentary. And they weren't going to let them use like a minute, like fair usage. And they used like maybe almost like the whole thing. And that really, really pissed everyone off, I think, including Dave. And he confronted him on the air about that, Joaquin. So that was awkward because that was real. That was real shit. That was great. So that was a moment. Justin Bieber talking about the Sistine Chapel, to the Sistine Chapel, which was really awkward and funny. There were some moments that predate me there. Remember when Sean Connery entered with the jetpack? Mm-hmm. Like some of the entrances were amazing. But in my time there, there was so many shows and there was so many moments where it just felt like even when the show was not doing well, because the comedy wasn't working and the audience wasn't laughing, Dave would turn to Paul. The audience had no idea he was making fun of them or criticizing them. And like he had just did a joke and there was nothing. And he goes to Paul, don't you love these moments here with just the crickets out and, the night is just so quiet. It's like, I love that stuff. It lives on in YouTube. All I could say is I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but there's a lot of great moments.
Yeah, and it was my mecca to get to see that live. I said back then, I went once. Steve Martin was on. I don't know if he.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I can't remember if he played the banjo, but it was like a freezing.
How about Steve and Dave's Gay Vacation?
I don't remember that one. I don't know.
Remote. That was funny. Yeah. But
Steve Martin was great because he always had to come up with. I love the guys that always had to come up with something. Like we're not just coming out.
A lot of work into it. Yeah. I think Dave appreciated that. Him and Tom Hanks and Martin Short and not because of their stardom, but because the work that they did into it to make it fun for Dave. Even Howard would always do something different.
So how hard is it then when the new show comes along? You get to work. I mean, it's like a new job, right? I mean, this is the same job you have, but now it's a totally new host. And what was it like?
It was hard. It was. I was missing Dave. It was weird because, like, overnight, I had been there 22 years, and then I was the new guy because a whole new group of people came in. It's not like we were building the show from scratch. They had a very successful show, Comedy Central, and they came in, and I'm like, wow, this is like so. I was like a ghost that was still living there, and it was tough. It was really, it wasn't easy. But I don't miss that. I miss Dave. I miss that era. That was it for me. And I think for a lot of people on late night.
Yeah. Well, again, it's not appointment television. It has nothing to do with, I don't think whoever came in, I don't think I'd ever watch it. I don't know who would make me watch. I got to go see what he did tonight. So it's
right.
So we're at the point now. I've kept you longer than but I've really enjoyed this.
You probably have too much material here. Is this going to be a two-parter? What are we doing?
I enjoyed it.
Is this a box set?
Yeah, well, part 2 starts here in a moment. But just again, I want you to be able to make sure you say kind of what you're up to nowadays, and just kind of get people to know what you. I know you're writing some musicals and plays, Restless, and maybe a tribute to Debbie.
Yeah. Oh, Debbie. It seems like my whole career is in whispering.
And it's cringy. It's just like.
Hello, my Debbie.
All right, what are you doing? Let's stop there.
I am. Oh, Brad. What are you wearing? Brad, are you wearing underwear? Are you wearing tighty whities? Oh, Brad.
This is disgusting.
I sound like what's his name? Sulu. Oma.
I was gonna say Pat O'Brien. When he called.
Oh, no, oh, God. No. Oh, please don't put me in that category. That's scary.
Hold on. I'm trying to remember what he said. Hold on. I got to remember. How did he? Oh, God.
We'll do some Coke.
That's right. How did, because I'm getting you and him confused now.
All right, will you stop confusing me with that?
All right, go ahead. Sorry. What are you doing these days?
That's funny. I love it. Keep that all in. I'm busy. It's my busy season. I'm writing. I'm writing a new musical with my writing partner Frankie Keene. She and I wrote Hereafter together. Hereafter was big. It was big in Argentina. It was really off Broadway, but it was appreciated by that audience a lot, and there were 3 productions of it there. I want to try to get it going in Korea, and someday bring it back here. But I'm writing a new musical with Frankie. I co-wrote a half-hour animated pilot that we're pitching now, and a game show, and keeping busy, working on some Zoom ideas, and talking to you.
COVID has changed our world, but we're still out here working and doing it.
It really has. It really has, and it's a new world order, and it's interesting because we're all in the same boat. Like everyone. When I say all, I mean everyone. Celebrities, talent, writers, producers. We all have to figure out how to do it a different way. Hopefully not forever, but and what you're doing is great. That you could do these interviews.
I love it. Yeah, I do. I want to ask one last question, then I'll let you go, because I want that last, like I said, those last couple of weeks. And again, Scott Ryan wrote this wonderful book. If people are letting him,
I spoke to Scott about that.
Yeah, and he was great. The book is great. I actually read. I don't read a lot. I read his book. What was it like for you? Because I don't think you're part of the booking, but you see that, oh my God, Norm Macdonald's coming in tonight, and then Bill Murray's coming in. What did you have any say, or what was it like just to see the names?
No, they didn't need me for that, and I was just like, I knew inevitably everyone was going to be there. I was concerned. I didn't see Regis on the board for a while, and then I think they used him in a walk-on at the end, and I thought that should have been probably a longer interview, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, and he did do that. I have to kind of go back, but. The thing that sucks, unfortunately for me, is that part of the last few weeks, we had to crash produce a 90-minute special to cover 30 years in less than 2 weeks. So by that point, I wasn't going to the tapings. I was immersed in an edit bay with Susan at the broadcast center doing that, so I missed some of that. And then for the last week, although the last show was frustrating for me, it was actually really, and I butted in with Barbara on that. And I think it's in the book, and I think she may remember it differently. Maybe I'm remembering it differently, but I remember saying to the show, and I'm not a genius for saying this, is like, this last night's going to be, there's a lot of show here. If you want, I'm sure I can give you 90 minutes. I can give you 2 hours. No. Dave wants to do it. The 1 hour show. I said, well, it's going to be difficult to undo this at the last minute, but because we had Corden on by then. We had a very popular show at 12:30, and you just can't assume you could do that. But that's my job. I would call Leslie and the president of the network, Kelly Call, and figure out, like, hey, for this one night, you think and they were like, no, we're fine. And then I'm watching the show and I'm mortified. I mean, it's great and it's beautiful, but I'm like, this is so fucking long. And then they say, well, we'd like that extra time now. And I'm like, well, now, it wasn't even I told you so. It was like, okay, so this is supposed to be like the end. We should be backslapping each other. And it took me over an hour to figure out. I had to call the West Coast. I had to find out how long over they were. And I'm doing this from the theater, and they're already starting to dismantle the theater. And I remember Debbie was there, and she was emotional. She's like, do we have to, can't we do this outside? Because this is very depressing. I mean, they were literally, thankfully, I think they preserved the important things for Dave, the desk and Paul, but all that backdrop stuff, just, taking it apart. It's like it never, all this magic that you remember, right? You beautiful, Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Cypher, fucking gone. It was like within an hour, they're dismantling this, and I'm arguing with Barbara, and I'm, working with the West Coast to get the extra time. Oh, I lost you there. I didn't even go to the after party. I was just so pissed. I was just like, this is so. Thanks for bringing that up, Brad. It was a horrible memory. It was good for you. and it's only good when I think about it on Google, on YouTube as the product. But yeah, it was the perfect way to end it for me too, because that was the epitome of when you get
wouldn't be easy. Yeah,
how they make the magic,
right.
you know. But I love them all. They're great. Barbara did an amazing job, and the director Jerry Foley, and you know, they were just all an incredible team. It wasn't just Dave. Yeah. It went really deep, from the bookings of the show, from the writing of the show, from the producers of the show. It was just you'll never see. It was like the 27 Yankees. You'll never see a group like that together, in front or behind the camera, ever again, I don't think.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine telling me he knew that this thing was going to last longer. He's like, check your DVR, because it's not going to catch the end, and you got to see the end. And then the great story, again, I'll refer to it one more time, but Barbara having to put that montage to the music live, and now it doesn't fit, and there she's taking things in and out, and it just, as a producer, thinking about, and you know, this, I used to do sports shows. This is nothing, you know. Okay, well, she's working on the Letterman final finale, and she's sitting there trying to make this thing fit. So I love.
What I remember from that is her fighting me, saying that I can't have certain clips for my montage, which is going to be a prime time. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you don't want to let me have, I'll give you this, but you can't have that. And I'm like, oh, we could both have it. We both should have it. So, yeah, see, everything that's a good memory for you is a bad for me. So stop talking, Brad.
All right, that's going to do it. I appreciate Vinnie for joining me. This was, I had a great time. I did.
Go to my website, VinnieFavale.com. VINNIE Favale.com.
All right, Vinnie, that's where we'll go. And appreciate Vinnie joining me here on Here's the Pitch. It's stlmasses.com, my sponsor, Masses Restaurants. In St. Louis, 5 locations. Go to that website. Check out their menus. If you're in St. Louis, drop by. There's locations all throughout the area. You'll love it. I appreciate Vinnie for joining me. Keep subscribing, liking, and commenting. There'll be more interviews like these coming throughout the year. I thank everybody for joining me, and we'll see you next time.